The Senate will come to order. Members, we have an addendum that we're working off of. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we have some authors' motions listed on the addendum. We will adopt these authors' motions as one motion. All those in favor of the authors' motions say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Senate resolution numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6, Senate resolutions 3 through 6 will be referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we will revert to the third order of business, messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce the passage by the House of the following House file herewith transmitted, House File Number 2, a bill for an act relating to public safety, delaying the effective date of the first meeting of the Ensuring Police Excellence and Improving Community Relations Advisory Council. Patrick D. Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
There's no further action required on that message. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we'll move to the fourth order of business, first reading of House bills. The Secretary will give the House file number its first reading.
House File Number 2.
First reading. Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that an urgency be declared within the meaning of Article 4, Section 19 of the Constitution of Minnesota with respect to House File Number 2, and that the rules of the Senate be so far suspended as to give House File Number 2 its second and third reading and placed on final passage.
Members, a reminder that a suspension of the rules requires 45 votes to prevail. Discussion on the Gazelka motion to suspend the rules. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. We'll take a brief pause to gather the votes of the members in alternate locations. Receiving a sufficient number of aye votes, the motion prevails. The Secretary will give House File Number 2 its second reading.
House File Number 2.
Second reading. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, House File 2 is before us, and it is a technical corrections bill to the bill that we passed the last time we met. That was the Law Enforcement Accountability Bill. The bill makes several technical corrections to the bill that I made reference to. It was passed during the 2020 second special session just last month, but this is requested by the Post Board, or the leadership of the Post Board. You may remember most of the bill was focused on the Post Board and regarding the law enforcement training and the scope of training and the accountability of that training regarding police officers and law enforcement. It also included an advisory council that includes appointees of the legislature as well as individual citizens that would also be on an advisory basis to the Post Board. In a nutshell, most of the changes that we have on this bill adjust dates and deadlines that we originally had in our original bill. You might remember this bill started to be discussed in May. We had a special session in June. This bill was not quite ready by June, and so it was passed ultimately in July. As a result, we focused mainly on policy, and quite honestly, up front, the dates that we had were created in May, and they were for the conclusion in the months of July, mostly, and later on in the year. The Post Board recognized that we didn't shift our time factor when we passed it in July, and so the dates that we have involve the first meeting of the Advisory Council that I talked to you about, the dates of a newly created database to start collecting disciplinary data of law enforcement. It was supposed to have started in January 15th of 21. That'll have to be adjusted 6 months later to July 1st of 2021. It's involving the start of the collection of that data. We also shifted the dates and times of the amended law enforcement training statute. You may recall that we improved the training of law enforcement and we made some additions to it. However, there are difficulties in the timeline. The Post Board was asking for that, as well as some of the discussion. Some of the language was written in a retroactive form, which was not the intention of the legislature. Finally, there was an appropriation. One of the appropriations in that bill included $145,000 to the Post Board, but it did not clearly articulate the purpose of that appropriation, and this bill clarifies the purpose of that appropriation to be specific for the staff of the Post Board to meet certification requirements for the new autism training and the changes to the currently existing crisis intervention and mental illness training. Mr. Chairman, like I said, the bill is rather brief. It makes corrections to some of the dates and provisions that I've outlined, and I'll stand for questions.
Discussion on House File Number 2, Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Limmer, for bringing this bill forward to make some technical corrections. The minority party here in the Senate, the DFL, supports the changes, although we certainly want to see some more specificity in training, hopefully in the next session. We have to continue to work on all these issues of public safety. The public is looking for us to lead, and I always have thought that we could do more. So thank you for the changes to clarify the mistakes we made in the last bill, but we have a long road ahead to do more. Thank you.
Further discussion on House File number 2, Senator Eichhorn. There's a switch on your desk, Senator, or on the desk.
There we go. All right, perfect.
Senator Eichhorn.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A50 amendment.
Senator Eichhorn offers the A50 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Eichhorn moves to amend House File number 2 as follows. Page 1, after line 10, insert. This is the A50 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Eichhorn.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Limmer, for the underlying bill. I wanted the opportunity to talk about a very important issue that's arose in Greater Minnesota, both crosses my district and Senator Tomassoni's district. It's dealing with the potential closure of the Togo prison. What this amendment would do was prohibit the commissioner from closing or moving the program from the Togo facility and require the commissioner to maintain the current staffing level from January 1, 2020 ongoing. That facility hosts the Challenge Incarceration Program, also known as CIP. It's a 90-bed program. It's a lot like what you would think of as a boot camp to be. It helps decrease recidivism rates by up to 35% or more. The CIP's impact on bed space and recidivism has reduced costs to the department in the tens of millions of dollars over its lifespan. These job losses in Greater Minnesota have a greater effect on Greater Minnesota than it would in other areas where there's considerably more job opportunities currently. These individual facilities were funded in our last budget biennium and were funded through the end of the 2021 cycle. So the money is there, and we're left wondering, where did the money go? Why did we end in this spot where they're saying they need money to keep these facilities running? And why at a time when public safety is so absolutely important would we choose to close a facility like this and move a program somewhere else that is so helpful to so many individuals? It's a program that changes a lot of lives and gets people back on the right path. And that's something we should be proud of and something we should want to do more of. So I would like to see this program continue on, and that's the guise of this amendment, is to keep that going because it is so important. I know my colleague who shares part of this issue with me, Senator Tomassoni, would also like to make a few comments about it as well, Mr. President.
Discussion on the A50 amendment. Senator Tomassoni.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Eichhorn, for the amendment. The Togo and Willow River issue in the DOC, cutting these programs is, in my mind, penny wise and pound foolish. We have a situation in both of these places where the program actually makes a difference in a real lot of people's lives. In fact, the people who come out of these programs, some of them might only have had a third-grade education when they went into the prison, and they come out with a GED, and they find a job, and the next thing you know, they're running a solar company or something to that effect. And some of the employers in Grand Rapids have told me that they actually would much rather hire people coming out of Togo than hire some of the people that they're getting applications from on the street. These are very, very good programs. We need to keep them around. But the central issue here is that we must be able to find some money in the state budget in order to keep this thing going, because the budgeting that we did in 2019 carries all the way over to June 30th of 2021. And the people that work in Togo are the type of people who are extremely dedicated to their jobs. I talked to 5 or 6 of them, and every single one of them, I've been here for 15 years, I've been here for 18 years, I've been here for 13 years. And they deliver a product that, because of their dedication, these people are actually graduating from the facility with the qualifications that they are now being assimilated back into society. But you also hear from places that are responsible for for example, in Hibbing, they use the prisoners to build handicap ramps for disabled people. They also the parks also use them for cutting wood for the people who go to parks in the area, and you know, losing 40 or 50 jobs has a spin-off effect on other jobs like restaurants and school districts and the like. And so we are sitting in a situation in Itasca County especially that a place like Keetac may not go back to work for another year if they do go back to work. There's 350 jobs. Blandon Paper is on the edge of something happening. Minnesota Power is wondering what's going to happen over in Cohasset. And then Big Fork has just lost about 50 jobs. And so the issue is that finding good paying jobs in rural Minnesota is extremely, extremely difficult, but also for the Department of Corrections to not recognize how important the results of what the work these people do is, and that the payback to society is actually very, very good because the recidivism rate is very, very low, is a really good reason for us to keep these places open. So members, somewhere along the way here, we have to find the money, we have to keep the place open, and we have to keep these jobs and these programs in rural Minnesota. Thank you.
Further discussion on the A50 amendment, Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to speak a little bit as well. I have a facility in my district at Willow River that has this program as well. Both Willow River and Togo are being presented that they're going to be closed. And, you know, this program is so good for the people who are involved in it. It is getting them ready to get back into society. It's helping prepare them. And they do such great work for the community. The city of Willow River has projects that get done with this group. I serve on the board for East Central Habitat for Humanity, and we've had this group come many times to put down sod or do some roofing or stain trim. And our director has always stated how incredible this group is, how respectful, how hardworking they are. But part of that is where it's located. They're in a facility different from a jail or a prison. So that's part of the draw to this program for these individuals. But I think another aspect that we have to look at is, I believe this body several times during session and special session supported the extra funding for Department of Corrections. Unfortunately, it was coupled with so many different things in negotiations that some of us weren't amenable to. But if cuts have to come to Department of Corrections, I would ask, why would we look at a program that is so incredibly successful and represents less than 2% of the department's total budget? I just don't understand. I am willing at times to do some extra spending, but when we are in an economic downturn that has been put on this entire state because of shutdowns, and we're asking our bar and restaurant owners, our salon owners, our fitness center owners, and so many other businesses to tighten their belts and do what they have to because it's the right thing to do because of the pandemic, I believe that same thing needs to be asked of our state agencies, and not do it in a way that the services that are so important and so critical are impacted like this. This decision just reminds me so much of what I heard when my first term in the House, when the DNR was being asked to trim some of their budget, and their response was, well, we'll have to close the bathrooms and the shower facilities at our state parks. How can that possibly be the first place to cut money? I believe they do that because it gets a public reaction, and the immediate response is we have to give them their money. I think the first thing that needs to be done is we need to say, let's take a step back. Where can we actually find some savings that will not impact services to the people of the state of Minnesota? And if we cannot find it after we look hard, then we can come and say, where's the funding going to come from to keep this going? But I think we need to look at it both ways. I do believe the support was there to increase funding for Department of Corrections, but we can't just always have a reaction of we have to give them their money. We have to start asking our state agencies to take a long, hard look at their budgets, because that's what we've asked all Minnesotans to do. So I do support this, and I submitted a bill that I could have offered as an amendment to this amendment to keep Willow River open. But I think we need to take a different approach. We need to look at where true cuts can come from without impacting services. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the A50 amendment. Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Just wanted to offer a thought on this topic. It's not in my district. I don't know a lot about the program, but I can talk to you about the method where this decision came and how flawed it is. Partly because I've been part of a discussion in the human services world about reductions to the direct care and treatment. There's a $38 million deficiency there, and the early proposals that were brought to me were to cut almost $100 million because of closing and layoffs involving none of the employees, none of the unions, and none of the public. And Mr. President, we are facing, if you add up the 2021 deficit and the 22-23, $6.6 billion deficit. That's bigger than the one we faced in 2011. It was 6 and it shrunk to 5 by the time we got around to it. And that was massive and horrific in terms of how we're going to manage it. And if the first thing we do, if the first thing the governor does to handle a little shortfall in a corrections program, or $38 million is kind of modest shortfall in my arena, the first thing to do is going to lay off 400 employees in the case of human services and whatever number of good state employees in the corrections part. Holy cow. We are going to see just really bad decision makings. Discussions we've had before about the ending the peacetime emergency was, could you please bring us into the process? And the part I didn't think we had to bring into the process was the state employees and their unions. And these are good people. I represent a good number of them. And these are just regular folks. They didn't choose state government to get rich. They chose state government because they wanted to serve, and they appreciated the kind of jobs they were, and a lot of things they appreciated. And they're really, really good people. And to pull the rug out from them on short notice like this in both these cases is just really, really wrong. And so it's just not what I would expect to come from a governor who's on the Democratic side of the wing and who's been supported by those very people that he's pulling the rug out. So there's an irony there, Mr. President, I do not understand. But I will tell the governor and the commissioners that I, for one, and I know many of us here are willing and able to be part of that dialogue to make a difference, to save the most essential programs, protect the important ones, and if it's a nice program, we may have to make some decisions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the A50 amendment. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to stand up and make it very clear to all those who are watching, perhaps the employers or the employees that are going to be furloughed on this, that there is a commitment from the Senate to make sure that the Corrections Department deficiency was a priority in the Senate. We had agreed upon in the special session number 1 to accept the governor's supplemental budget of $58 million, which was an agreed upon by all the leaders of some of the hiring savings that were going to accrue. And the Corrections Department deficiency was in that amount. And we were going to vote on it. It never came over from the House. So members, that was in there. The zoo was in there for $5 million. Veteran suicide prevention for $1 million. The rape kits for $3.1 million. Some funding for the PCA at $13 million. Direct care and treatment operating adjustment at $21 million. The BCA crime lab at $1.4 million. The state patrol operating adjustment for the Capitol at $1.2 million. That was something we were anxious to vote on, that was attached to the CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Fund money, that was not very fair, but we agreed to it. and it never came over. So members, this 11.2 million in savings is on the backs of the Challenge Incarceration Program, which is a very successful program, as our fellow colleagues have mentioned, and this is very serious business. That is going to be, those inmates are going to be transferred to those facilities where they have an early release program, and you're going to see increase in social programs and corrections, local government, and HHS dollars. So really, there's no savings here, and you're ripping apart a program that has historical success and true savings in the long run. So, members, I do support this amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Tomassoni.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, I don't know if I did justice to what the program actually does and how important it is. And so I think the best way to probably express it is to read something from one of the employees there who sent me this a little while ago. And here's what she said. The CIP is a 6-month early release program. Sentences can be reduced by up to 48 months. That's 48 months that our graduates aren't being housed inside a prison and instead are able to get back to their lives and their loved ones as productive members of their communities. We are able to work outside of a traditional prison setting, which allows the men to set aside the prison mindset and criminal thought process. We work on physical and emotional health. Chemical dependency needs are met. I have had so many men tell me that they have gone through treatment multiple times. This is the first time, though, that they are actually doing the work and appreciating the changes they see in themselves. Educational needs are met. When GEDs are earned in our program, the guy wears a cap and a gown at a CIP graduation ceremony, and he is presented with his diploma. His achievements are celebrated, and inevitably I cry happy tears that his work has paid off. Cognitive thinking and experimental learning build self-confidence, trust and team building, as well as an ability to think about how you think. The men get up at 5 every day of the week. Their beds have 4 folds and 45-degree corners. Suits are ironed and boots are polished every day. Their socks are made into perfect 4-inch rolls. Our industry supplies firewood to the state campgrounds up here. That's because the men cut, chop, and bundle that wood. It's hard work, and they do it day in and day out. At CIP, our kitchen staff works with the men on all aspects of working in the kitchen, from inventory and ordering to making spaghetti sauce from scratch, enough to feed everyone. Sometimes we meet a guy who has never made cookies in his life, but he learns and makes some amazing cookies as well as some really amazing plans to bake at home with his children, something never considered before. We work in our communities. If you live in Nashwauk and you need a fire hydrant in the winter, CIP probably shoveled access to them. If you go visit a rural, previously unkept cemetery and find it raked and mowed, CIP probably did it. You should see our gardens. The men start seeds and have their hands in the dirt through the entire process. We are currently enjoying peas, beans, cucumbers, collards, cauliflower, broccoli, and tomatoes, fertilizer and pesticides for free. We have conversations about life and death, books and music. We look at bugs and learn what they are for and what they are good for. We have showy lady slippers, ghost pipe plants, deer, bear, and skunks. I learn as much from the men as they learn with me. So, members, this is really, really an effective program, and we really, really have to find a way to keep it going.
Further discussion on the A50 amendment. Senator Eichhorn.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members, for those good comments, and Senator Tomassoni and Senator Rosen for working hard to make sure that there is some additional funding there as well, and I hope we can keep working on it. As you guys have heard, this is a program that changes people's lives, and we were just so disappointed to see this decision come out, and in fact, the employees there were caught off guard as well. I think it was a decision that very few people expected, and for something that's just a small percentage of the DPS budget. I think we can do better. This is a program that should stay in place, and I think we've laid out the case very well today. I hope the governor and the commissioner are listening. With that, I did speak to Senator Limmer about this amendment before bringing it forward. I don't want to mess up what Senator Limmer has going on. There certainly could be a germaneness issue here as well. So with that, Mr. President, I will pull the amendment. I hope we can keep working on this with both Senator Rosen and with Senator Limmer and with the governor and his staff to make sure that we can keep these facilities open. Thank you.
Senator Eichhorn withdraws the A50 amendment. Members, we are back on House File 2. Any further discussion? Senator Limmer.
Mr. President, thank you. Just a few words in conclusion. Senator Eichhorn, I appreciate the amendment that you had. I quite honestly wish we would have voted for it. But this bill is not an appropriation bill. Nevertheless, sometimes you have to bring these amendments up to get a word out of the devastation that that decision was made. Quite frankly, if we have to cut a budget, I was rather stunned that we were going to start in the area of essential services and in an area pointed at a corrections budget that worked so well. I was rather shocked by the suggestion and the decision by the administration to close those two campuses. Those two campuses have very award-winning, recognized programs that put inmates on a tremendously successful path to straight and narrow living beyond the prison setting. These are more like camps than they are prisons. But the other aspect that we have not fully discussed is the impact to those local communities that have so much of the income coming into that community based on those two facilities in outstate, rural, isolated areas. A tremendous impact. The last place I would have cut a state budget would have been in the corrections or a public safety budget. Nevertheless, they say in the legislature, nothing's ever over. And so I hope the administration's listening. I know the people in those communities are listening. And I hope that we can come to some resolve. There was preliminary agreement with a deficiency budget earlier this year. And like I say, nothing's over until it's over. So let's be positive. Thank you, Senator Eichhorn and Senator Rarick, for bringing the concerns of your community to the legislature. I thank you for withdrawing the amendment, but this discussion cannot be over yet. And so, Mr. President, the technical correction bill that we originally discussed is now before us. I do believe there's agreement on that. And by the way, Senator Tomassoni, thank you for defending your community as well. This is vitally important, and I think it's obvious it's a concern for both the Republican side of this body as well as the DFL. So, Mr. Chairman, I stand now fully presenting this bill.
The Secretary will give House File 2 its third reading.
House File Number 2, a bill for an act relating to public safety.
Third reading. Members, any final discussion on the bill? We're on final passage of House File 2. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. Members in the retiring room, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in room 303 and members in the President's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in rooms 323, 237, and 206, please come to the chamber to vote. Rooms 323, 237, and 206. I will call on Senator Jasinski to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Report a aye vote for Senator Johnson.
Johnson votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Curran votes aye.
Curran votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Hall votes aye.
Hall votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Jensen votes aye.
Jensen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Anderson P. votes aye.
Anderson P. votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Nelson votes aye.
Nelson votes aye. I'll call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Why, thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bigham votes aye.
Bigham votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Clausen votes yes.
Clausen votes yes. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Hayden votes no.
Hayden votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes yes.
Isaacson votes yes. Senator Frentz.
Senator Lane votes yes.
Lane votes yes. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes yes.
Latz votes yes. Senator Frentz.
Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Marty votes yes.
Marty votes yes. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes yes.
Newton votes yes. Senator Frentz.
Senator Sparks votes yes.
Sparks votes yes. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes no.
Torres Ray votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Wickland votes yes.
Wickland votes yes. Senator Frentz.
One moment, Mr. President. Senator Rest votes no.
Senator Rest votes no.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 6 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the appointment of the Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry be withdrawn from the Committee on Rules and Administration.
On that motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now consent to and confirm the appointment of the Department of Labor and Industry Commissioner Nancy Leppink.
To that motion, Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President and members, it takes 34 yes votes to confirm a commissioner. If there are not 34 yes votes, they are not confirmed, which means they no longer remain a commissioner. And this is something that's been brewing since the very, very beginning of the year. It's a very serious matter that the Senate has the obligation to do or not to do, is confirm commissioners or not confirm commissioners. On average, it's something like once every 6 years or so a commissioner is not confirmed. And I'm going to lay out the reasons why I will be voting no for Commissioner Leppink. But it is our responsibility to evaluate commissioners, and it is the accountability measure that we have as the Senate, and it's only the Senate. It is not the House and the Senate, it is only the Senate. And I want this body to know that early in the year, she passed out of the hearing without recommendation, and myself and 3 other senators went to talk to the governor about the fact that we felt like she was not doing her job. There's actually 2 commissioners, but we laid out the case why, and I want to say it publicly now, but privately then I asked the governor if he would consider finding another place for her because I thought she was the wrong fit for this job. The Department of Labor and Industry is not the Department of Labor, it's the Department of Labor and Industry. It's a crucial role. And if you think about it, there has been much more cooperation between the trade unions and the business community about how they can work together on so many different issues in Minnesota. I've never seen the cooperation that I've seen in the last 3-4 years that I see now. And so that role is to be right in the middle of those 2, helping businesses to succeed. If there's a bad apple, you pluck them out. But the idea is you're working with them and you're working with the trades to produce this environment that is a place where businesses prosper and employees do well. And that has not been happening. And so we went to the governor with that, and there was no change. And I want to say that we were going to do this fairly quickly after that, but everybody knows what happened, and that was COVID-19. And that was a huge issue that hit Minnesota, and there was no way that I wanted to distract from this important thing that we would show Minnesota that we were working together, even though she had not performed her job well. And then we were going to do it a few months later, and then we had this giant riot and tragedy of the death of George Floyd. And again, Minnesota was traumatized, and I said, I want to wait. And maybe those were a mistake. Maybe I should have done it immediately when I began talking about it, but it just didn't feel like that was in the best interest. That didn't mean that we weren't responsible to do our duty. And so I want to talk about a few of the things that I think it's important for the public to know as to why we're doing what we're doing. And the main point I want to say is that the Department of Labor and Industry is expected to be responsive and to a service of the state's businesses, not a hindrance, and interfere regularly with their daily operations, especially in the middle of a pandemic. So number one, I have heard case after case of harassment from so many senators telling me about their constituents that have been harassed that I have never had. I've never had that kind of volume coming back to me over one commissioner. Businesses across the state need a responsive and supportive commissioner as we recover from COVID. Leppink has instead increased regulations on business and even been hostile to businesses. and it's not responding to the needs they have as we address reopening and compliance with COVID executive orders. Under that topic, members, there were union intrusions. She unethically invited union bosses to review non-union work environments and allowed them to collect documentation on businesses without their permission. She put undue pressure on wedding barns that she said they just barely were getting over COVID, and now they had to have sprinklers in these old wedding barns. And there's going to be, I'm asked another senator to talk about that issue, because it was an issue, again, destroying a whole business community of weddings that were done in barns. And there was an issue related to that, related to OSHA safety. More frustration under Commissioner Leppink. We heard union stakeholders that OSHA is not addressing the workplace safety concerns, something that should be a top priority during COVID. So harassment instead of support in probably the most crucial time that businesses needed people in government to help them succeed when they were shut down. The second area, and again, this was also after that visit with the governor early, was the handling of work comp related to COVID. We knew that the frontline workers, we weren't 100% sure that they were covered under workers' compensation, and so we had to fashion language to make sure that that happened. And I know, Mr. President, you were a big part of fashioning a deal between both sides of that everyone agreed with except Commissioner Leppink, and she shot it down. And the second agreement she shot down. And it just made no sense because it delayed something that had to be done. And thankfully, in the end, she went and agreed to basically the first agreement that we had set. But it created unnecessary harm. The third one I want to bring up is wage theft confusion. As you all recall, last year we passed a bill that wanted to protect workers to make sure their wages got paid, and we passed it in a bipartisan fashion. But then under Commissioner Leppink's leadership, the Department of Labor and Industry reinterpreted the legislation and distributed misleading and confusing information to businesses across the state. She was notified of the issue with their guidance in October of 2019, but didn't update the information until May 2020, leaving employees unsure of how to comply and employees unsure of their rights. It took 8 months to get her to act. And finally, another thing that I want to bring up among a list that could be much, much longer was how she's handled youth employment exemptions. The commissioners made broad judgments about youth employment exemptions and failed to do due diligence to make informed and unbiased decisions. This action has hurt young people from joining the workforce and nearly shuttered the historic Paul Bunyan Amusement Park up in Senator Rude's district that was going to prevent 16 and 17-year-olds from doing a job they had been doing for decades under other Department of Labor and Industry commissioners, and suddenly it was no longer okay. Lawn mowing was the same thing, and we actually had to pass legislation for them to do the job that had always been okay under everybody else, but somehow wasn't. And so, members, I don't do this, I do this with great seriousness. This is not something I take lightly. It took me months to get to it. It was behind the scenes with the governor, asking him to find a different place for her. But, Mr. President, members, she is in the wrong role, in a key role that represents the whole state. As government is interacting with business, the Department of Labor and Industry has to have somebody that can connect to labor and connect to industry and work with them in what feels like cooperation, not a hammer that's about to come down every time they make a misstep. And so I know that there are there's 3 other members who want to talk about the things I talked to that I've asked to speak. And members, when we finish, I'm going to recommend, or I will be voting no.
Members, I have a list of members who would like to speak. Senator Kent, and then followed by Senator Rude. Senator Kent.
Mr. President, I would like to ask if Senator Gazelka will yield.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Kent.
Senator Gazelka, when you and I spoke yesterday evening about the anticipated business today, did you tell me that there was nothing controversial expected on today's agenda?
No.
Senator Gazelka.
Excuse me, Mr. President and Senator Kent, no, I did not. I did say we'd be done in a day.
Senator Kent.
Mr. President, thank you. Senator Gazelka, I remember very clearly that you spoke that we would be doing the emergency powers resolution and that there would be technical bills, that there would be nothing controversial. And so I take serious issue with your representation of what you described to me would be on the floor today. I want to say that I think this is outrageous, it is a travesty, and it is absolutely not fitting of the Minnesota Senate to handle something of this serious nature without due notice that this would be discussed. This commissioner has been in office for almost 2 years, and I understand that Senator Gazelka has laid out some timeline here about all these opportunities to deal with this in an upfront manner, but no, with absolute notice, no notice, we are going to take this up today. Senator Gazelka has just laid out an entire list of concerns that he shares, that he is telling us about, that he is bringing forward about this commissioner's performance in her position. He talks about this as having a seriousness. He talks about conversations that have happened behind the scenes. We happen not to have the people in this body today who have worked on this issue, who have worked with the commissioner, who have worked with everybody involved with what has been discussed, and they are not here because they were not given due notice to be able to respond and talk about it. We should never take up something as serious as the commissioner of a department, of an agency in this state, on something without so much as a by your leave. Mr. President, we are in the middle of a pandemic, as Senator Gazelka just took us through. This has massive ramifications for our workforce, for labor, and for industry. And to take up something like this in this moment without giving it a legitimate, transparent, serious debate and discussion is absolutely not appropriate. And I strongly suggest that we should not do this at this time.
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Kent, I do appreciate the counterpoint. I will say that she did go through the process. There was a hearing, and she went through it without recommendation, which is a strong warning of things to come. And as I mentioned, it may have been better had we done it a month later or 2 months later, but as I said, we had to manage through COVID and we had to manage through the riots. And I wanted to give the governor every opportunity to find another location for her. He chose not to.
Next on the list is Senator Ruud.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I take this very seriously. But members, and I want to thank all the members of this chamber. During session, we passed a bill, and it came unanimously off the floor to help youth workers and to help our businesses. And we did have a discussion of how that process worked. And we did have a discussion about the commissioner and how the bill came to be. So this is not a new topic for this body, because when we discussed the bill on the Paul Bunyan amusement park, we did discuss how that bill came to be. So I will give you a little refresher. Paul Bunyan Land is family owned. It's a small operation. They're not big business. They don't have big lobbyists. They're not quite sure how the process all works. They just do a good job of having Paul Bunyan speak to families. So in 2019, their spring season, they hired their workforce, including 16 and 17-year-olds. Paul Bunyan Land is a very prized job for our high school students. It's a great place to work, and they learn great work ethics. So they hired their 16 and 17-year-old workforce, and they sent in the required waivers to Dolly, a system that had worked for them for over 15 years. The process works very well, or it did. They would hire their workers, fill out the waivers. The waivers go home to mom and dad so that mom and dad and the parents know what the children will be doing or their workforce will be doing, so that everybody is on the same page of what that job entails. The parents have to sign it, then it goes back to the business, and then the business sends it to the state. And this is a process that's worked well for over 15 years, decades, for the business. So in 2019, all the waivers were denied. There was no notification, no explanation, no help on how to work forward, just no solution, just the answer, no. They tried very hard to work with the commissioner to understand why their waivers didn't work now after decades, but they got no answer. So they went through the whole season really crippled by not having their workforce. And it really harmed their business because they were proud of the workforce and the service that they provide to the families, and they didn't have a workforce to do the job that they always had done. And so they got comments, you know how social media is, that they didn't have enough staff to help the children. And so it really hurt their hearts that they couldn't do the job that they needed to do. So then in December, they came to me and the chamber, and they said, we need help. We can't go through another season like this. We will close our doors. Can you please help us? I contacted Senator Pratt because he's in the Jobs Committee. I said, can you help us through this? So we had a meeting. And in January, we had a meeting with the commissioner. And the commissioner told us that, she said, well, I don't like the interpretation of the waivers. It's not how I interpret it, so we aren't going to use them. She said, it doesn't matter that my predecessors used them for decades. I no longer am going to. But she did not offer us a solution to go forward. So the only way a deal was reached was an unusual amount of legislation. It should have been, the commissioner should have come to the business and said, how can I help you go forward? We're changing the game. I'm sorry that I crippled you last year, but going forward, we should have a plan. But there was no plan. So we had to legislate. Something that should have been so simple as to how may I help you became a legislative issue. Then we found out that Paul Bunyan Land wasn't the only business affected. There were businesses all across the state that were affected by this waiver system. And we also found that she made a decision preventing 16 and 17-year-olds from even mowing lawns, which, I tell you what, kids mow lawns everywhere. That's how they make their summer money. That's how they make their money to go to college. You talk about college debt. Getting our 16 and 17-year-olds into the workforce is how we prevent all the college debt that we have going forward. So members, I thank you for passing the bill to solve the problem that the commissioner made. So going forward, members, I take this very seriously, and we really need a commissioner who is responsive and supportive and open to helping our businesses, especially now when so many have been closed because of COVID-19. It will be especially important to have a commissioner who will help the businesses that are crippled now through no fault of their own. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next, I have Senator Rarick, followed by Senator Housley. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, again, this is a serious issue we're taking up, and it's not an easy one for me. In 1992, I became a member of IBW 110, and I became very involved. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, I served on our apprenticeship committee, where we worked hand in hand with representatives from the Contractors Association to vet and pick people to be in our apprenticeship program, to be our upcoming members. And there I really learned that it was important for the labor side and the business side to work together for the future of the industry. When I got elected to the legislature, that took on a whole new role. And sometimes that can be a very, very fine line to walk when you represent the union labor side and the contractor side. And there are a number of times where I've had to make some very tough decisions on where I should be. And this is one of those issues, but I think we heard about the wage theft bill that we passed, and I heard last summer from businesses across the area, from our school administration to electrical co-op and others, saying the information they were getting, the hassle they had to deal with, we had to do something and fix that. And as we found out in committee, it was a misinterpretation from the agency that led to all of that. And then issues with the 16 and 17-year-old workforce, especially at Paul Bunyan Land and Valley Fair, that was very, very hard for me to look past. This is a Department of Labor and Industry. And like I said, I walk that line of representing both. And when I have to come to a decision as to how I should vote here, I ultimately look at and think about, well, what is the right decision to help both sides? I can't represent just one. And members, voting no on this confirmation today is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Next, I have Senator Housley, followed by Senator Frentz. Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Senator Ruud said, we do take this very seriously, and it's unfortunate that it's come to this. I sit on the Jobs Committee, and we discussed numerous times the Commissioner's performance, so much so that she passed out of committee with no recommendation. So to Senator Kent's point, that was the notice right there. The Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry is expected to be responsive and work with our businesses across the state. Even Governor Walz said before the chamber event that these agencies need to come to you with regulatory humility to build regulations together. Since under Commissioner Lepping's leadership, this has not been happening. Case in point this year is with our rural event centers, also known as wedding barns. There are more than 120 wedding barns across the state, small family-owned businesses providing a barn for a wedding or an event pavilion. They were operating just fine for decades. They always followed their local fire marshal's code in regards to fire and safety, had their venues inspected by their local fire code marshal, and made sure that they were in compliance when it comes to occupancy loads, number of egresses, emergency exits, and fire extinguishers. But last summer, all of that changed under the new interpretation from Commissioner Lepping. The rural event center owners and wedding barn owners were notified that they needed to put in elaborate and very, very expensive sprinkler systems. Mind you, there has never been a wedding barn in the state of Minnesota that has burned down. Numerous times, these small business owners tried to contact Commissioner Lepping for a meeting, but she was never able to meet with them, so they turned to the legislature. And we have been trying to work with the department since January. But at every turn, there's resistance, avoidance, misrepresentation of the facts. We continued to work with the state fire marshal, DEED, and at the last minute, Dolly did come to the table, and we thought we had a solution for all the stakeholders. Since COVID, these weddings and event centers, weddings and large events have been completely canceled. These small business owners, these family-owned businesses have no business. They are really, really hurting. And then the Department of Labor just piles on. A letter was sent to the commissioner. Senator Rosen sent a letter back on March 3rd, signed by both Democrat and Republican senators, asking for a common sense, reasonable solution for from the commissioner. But nothing came. Then, on May 6th, the Department of Health sent out a memo to all inspectors across the state to enforce the code as Commissioner Lepping interpreted it. It said if these wedding venues weren't in compliance with the elaborate and expensive sprinkler systems, they were supposed to issue them a fine. Talk about kicking them when they're down. As of today, our small family-owned wedding barn venues still don't have an answer. Brides are coming to them saying, are you going to be open next summer? Can I plan my wedding here? They don't know because they don't know what the commissioner and the Department of Industry and Labor is going to issue them a fine or not, or if they can be open. Again, Governor Walz says that our agencies are supposed to come to us with humility and work these things out together, and that just hasn't happened with Commissioner Lepping. So members, we expect the Department of Labor and Industry to be responsive and work with our businesses across the state, yet unfortunately, it's not happening under Commissioner Lepping. So with that being said, I will be voting not to confirm. Thank you.
Next is Senator Frentz, followed by Senator Franzen. Senator Frentz.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. First of all, we hear words like warning and take seriously and discussion. And I hope we all know what we're saying here, which is that Senator Kent is reporting we had no warning of any kind of this, including a discussion that happened between the caucus leaders last night. So the word warning is ringing around this chamber, and it seems obvious that the majority party did not give warning, and I can only assume that was on purpose. But let's talk about the Minnesotans who have a stake in this. If I'm not mistaken, tens of thousands of Minnesotans are represented by organizations asking us to please confirm this commissioner. Among those groups, the Minnesota Precision Manufacturing Association, the Minnesota Professional Firefighters, Centro de Trabajadores Unidos, the Sheet Metal Workers, the Minnesota Safety Council, a past DLA commissioner, Ken Peterson, North Central States Carpenters, the Building Trades, Minnesota AFL-CIO. The Minnesota Police and Peace Officer Association wrote a letter to us asking us to confirm this commissioner. IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, IBEW said, please confirm this commissioner. And those that vote no on this commissioner will have to explain to IBEW why that recommendation did not count for them. And finally, the Minnesota Grocers Association. It seems that there are quite a few Minnesotans represented by organizations here saying, please confirm this commissioner, and I will be a yes vote, and I encourage members to vote yes. As for the issue of how much warning was given to the minority caucus, we'll have to talk about that at some other time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next on the list is Senator Franzen, followed by Senator Cohen. Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I find this process outrageous. That we are planning every month to come here to vote to extend a peacetime emergency, and we can't give the minority party the courtesy to give us the agenda for that day. It's not only disrespectful, it's reckless, it's outrageous. I can go on. I've been here 8 years. I'm not the most senior member, but I've never seen this done before by either party. So members, let's just start being a little bit more civil about you all talk about how important this is and how serious you take this, but it doesn't seem you take it serious. At least you don't think we'll take it seriously, because we didn't even have time to prepare our notes to talk about someone who's going to be either out the door by the end of the day. I don't think that's very courteous of us, much less to the public, who might want to be part of this discussion by viewing it. No notice to the public. Because we want to do this behind closed doors at the end of the day when people are beat up and tired. I'm not tired. I actually got really rattled up as soon as I saw this coming up, because I don't think this is the way the Minnesota Senate should work. I did not sign up to ambush the minority party or the majority party. This is a very serious appointment. So members, when we're going to do this, at least give us a courtesy, Senator Gazelka. That's all we asked for. Because we know this vote was going to come. Sooner or later, it was going to come. It's not very hard to let our minority leader know what's going to come up. I'm not sure why you decided to do this surprise, Senator Gazelka, Mr. President. I will have my comments through you. But to say that the commissioner has not performed her job well, one thing would be that she's not performing her job. But that she's not performing her job well seems to be pretty subjective. And members, I've had the interaction with the commissioner in her work to pass the wage theft bill, which is one of the model bills in the entire country. People are singing us praises as a state for what we did and all the work that got together to really bring all the coalitions to work together, labor and industry. So if you disagree with the commissioner's leadership style, that might be one thing. But I don't think that's enough to vote against someone who's done so much for labor and industry to our state, for our state. So members, think deeply. Voting no is a vote against labor. Voting no is a vote against the wage theft law that we passed together on a bipartisan basis. That now, you know, I understand that you had some issues, Senator Gazelka, with some of your members and Mr. President, maybe not being very happy with some of the results in some certain districts, but reprimanding a commissioner for doing her job. And mind you, as a lawyer, I can say a waiver is a waiver, is an exception to the law. It's not the law. Waivers can change any day, any time, for whatever reason. People change, city councils change, elections change, decision makers change. A waiver is not a law. And I do support some of these bills that were mentioned earlier by my colleagues to let kids mow the lawn in a safe manner. But some of these implications, some of these bills that we vote on have serious implications. And you might think it's just someone mowing the lawn in your neighborhood, but that might be someone else doing something much bigger in a bigger setting, on a farm and so forth. And not all of us are experts on this. So we have to be very careful to just blanket say that that should have been changed, that shouldn't have been done. And I'm not here to defend whether she took a meeting or didn't take a meeting. But it just seems like it's a bit more on the subjective side that she did not do her job well versus she did not do her job. And members, there's a lot of different leadership styles in this chamber and in the work environment and in business and in labor. Because I know sometimes when some of us speak here, we're attached with a certain characterization because of our gender, because of whatever. But if you do not like someone's style of leadership, if you don't agree with someone's decision, that's a different story, Mr. President and Madam and all you members. I just think it's a disgrace that we are using this process to shame someone for the job that they did. To characterize harassment, to use the word hostile, undue pressure, those are strong words. And members, this is one-sided. The commissioner isn't here to talk to us and defend herself. So I would just tone it down because these words have serious implications. I understand the issue with Senator Housley and the sprinklers in her barns, and I understand Paul Bunyan. We all love Paul Bunyan. Those are two examples. Please, Senator Gazelka and Mr. President, give me some more examples of why she wasn't doing her job well. Why she should go out the door today when we have really good laws that came out of this chamber that we all voted on a bipartisan basis to make sure we have worker safety during a pandemic nonetheless. Now is not the time to make this political. Now it's a time to strengthen our leadership. And if we have issues with the governor's administration, then let's get to work. Let's fix them. But this is a very serious decision that you're making here today. And I can get over the fact that we didn't get any notice, but I think the timing is still wrong. Because unlike the majority who thinks we're not in an emergency, I do believe we still are. So members, please support our commissioner, our governor to get us through this emergency and not take the tools that he needs, that our state needs to keep our employees safe and give our employers guidance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next on the list is Senator Cohn, followed by Senator Dibble. Senator Cohn.
Mr. President, and Senator Gazelka, you've been very complimentary toward me relative to the possible loss of my institutional knowledge. So let me offer a little bit of institutional knowledge. I've been a member of the Senate where we've had a handful of confirmation battles, both on the part of commissioners appointed by Democrats and commissioners appointed by Republicans. And I would have to join with Senator Kent in the concern relative to how this is being handled today. Because when I've participated or observed, been a member of the Senate, relative to some of the prior battles over commissioners, there was always notice to the party of the governor. There was no question that on the floor today or tomorrow, we were going to take up the particular commissioner's appointment. And none of us in the minority had any expectation that this was going to be an issue in today's session. And understanding that the entirety of this session is a strange session because of COVID, this enhances the strangeness of it. And I'm disappointed that the majority would do something today in this fashion in contrast to what has always been how we've handled things where we've had fights over commissioners' appointments in the past. And if you'll allow me to move from there, and again, I haven't quite used Senator Kent's adjectives, but would share how she feels about this, and like I said, the extent to which this departs from what the past custom in this body has been. I would like to suggest, however, relative to this particular appointment, and not so much the concerns, I want to address the concerns in a second, but to look at other kinds of fights over commissioners. Usually it's been some significant ideological concern over a particular commissioner. In fact, there was one confirmation, and I think probably about half the Senate were members, when a former member of the Senate was turned down for a commissioner's appointment. And there were concerns over, I think, that person's ideology, contrary to the then majority. Other kinds of fights, one that the Senate minority pursued when we were in the majority, relative to an appointment by Governor Pawlenty, that was also an ideological concern on the part of our caucus. This is really unique, I think, where we've heard anecdotal kinds of considerations relative to Commissioner Lepik. We've had complaints that have come in to different senators. I happen to have a district that is filled with business owners, and it's a little bit atypical of maybe the usual Democratic district in the state. But there are many, many business owners. I know any number of them. By party, they happen to be a mixture of both Democrats and Republicans. And I try to stay in touch with the district and try to have a sense of how we as a state government are interacting with folks like that. And I have to admit, I've not heard the concerns voiced to me. And I'll inquire of people, what else should we be doing? If I'm in a business in my district, even if the business owner is not a constituent, we might have a discussion about what the state legislature is doing, what the state government's doing. And I can honestly say, I've not heard the anecdotal kinds of complaints that I'm hearing from the majority. And Senator Ruud, we've worked on a number of things together. And you know that I mentioned to you, and I think others have, how much we liked listening in Senator Pratt's committee to the discussion of Paul Bunyan. And I was concerned, hearing some of the discussion about how the agency may or may not view younger workers. But again, I haven't heard anything on a widespread, statewide basis that would suggest that this particular commissioner is not doing her job, and not doing her job in an appropriate way. In fact, I'm struck, I think I have a letter that was sent to Senator Pratt by Mr. Scott Brenner. Mr. Brenner was an assistant commissioner of the agency, internal counsel, when Governor Carlson was in office. And he worked with this commissioner when she was, at that time, when she was in the Attorney General's office, and was so impressed with her that when he became commissioner of the agency under Governor Pawlenty, she worked as the general counsel within the department. So clearly this is somebody who has worked with both Democrats and Republicans, and certainly I would suggest that Governor Pawlenty's administration was, if we can look at it in an ideological sense, much less liberal, much more conservative than Governor Walz's administration. And yet the previous commissioner, the first commissioner of Governor Pawlenty, strongly supports her nomination and her confirmation as commissioner. And I happen to serve on Senator Pratt's committee. I'm a latecomer to the committee. I joined the committee probably midway through the term. Have enjoyed the committee, have enjoyed the chairmanship of Senator Pratt, but I can suggest to members that what I heard in the committee relative to whether it be the wage theft legislation or some of the other concerns, again, seemed to be anecdotal. There wasn't a broad sweep of, again, ideological concerns or concerns voiced by a significant number of people throughout the state. I'm not aware of trade associations. Senator Frentz went through a number of associations in support of the nomination. I haven't heard any significant number of associations against this commissioner. And I would suggest to members that if we start going down this road in terms of the confirmation of commissioners, irrespective of whom is governor, we're setting a precedent, I would argue, with turning down this particular appointment. Because again, where we've done it before, there have been some very broad concerns well known to all the members of the body. This, I believe, is unique. And I hope members would think twice before we go down this road and set a precedent that I think will be unfortunate for the state Senate.
Next on the list is Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. First, please allow me to share a few thoughts that were beamed into me by our DFL lead on this committee, Senator Bobby Joe Champion, who, because of this ambush, wasn't able to be here and be prepared to stand up and speak to the commissioner's qualifications. So a few thoughts from him. The commissioner is thoughtful. She works for all, provides guidance to employers and employees, and she works well with unions as well. She is responsive. She's not a hindrance or hostile to businesses. She follows the law. She is intelligent, insightful, fair, and in addition to the administration, she has never been the subject of any malfeasance that's been alleged. She simply has had some differences in approaches, so there is no sufficient grounds for taking this action today. There's been no confusion on wage theft, just simply a reinterpretation of the law. And in his view, the first hearing was an ambush by a small number of employers that she had actually even tried to help. He would be here. Senator Champion wanted to communicate to speak, but this was not on the agenda. He feels this is a total and unconscionable blindsiding of us as the DFL minority. We resolved the Paul Bunyan issue, and there wasn't a misinterpretation of the law, and that is why there needed to be some changes to that. Her responsiveness should not be interpreted as a surrender of her opinion and her leadership, and he feels that the complaints that have been lodged so far is simply an expression of only wanting a commissioner who always agrees with the majority party on some of these matters. I'll just add, members, that Senator Frentz had talked about a number of expressions of support that have been communicated from industry, as well as labor, as well as her colleagues and other professionals, her peers. And I'll just read a little bit of that which came in from, for example, the Minnesota Grocers Association, no flaming liberal organization, mind you. Commissioner Lepping's willingness to support industry in our membership has been positive. She is a thoughtful leader who seeks input from stakeholders to inform her decision-making process. She is pleasant and approachable and aims to achieve positive results for her constituencies, business workers, youth employees, etc. Has a strong work ethic and is dedicated to supporting a collaborative approach in working with the food industry. From the Minnesota Precision Manufacturers Association, industry. On behalf of the Minnesota Precision Manufacturing Association, I am pleased to recommend Nancy Lepping for confirmation as Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. She has been responsive to our concerns and works hard to find solutions. She brings people together to ensure all voices are heard and respected. Under her leadership, the department worked with MPMA to make significant improvements to the YST program. That program was a key project we had advocated for, and it's been great to have such a focus on it from a trusted ally. Our members have made great use of the pipeline program and both combined provide tools to keep our workforce development initiatives moving forward. From Ajax Metal Forming Solutions, industry. On behalf of Ajax Metal Forming Solutions, I am pleased to have the opportunity to recommend Nancy Lepping for Commissioner as Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. Through these years, her direction has developed many systems to help support manufacturing and enhancing the overall Minnesota workforce through apprenticeships, Minnesota Safety Council, and the overall support and dedication of the Department of Labor is a direct reflection on her ability to support businesses and individuals alike. Under her leadership, the apprenticeship program has given many training opportunities for individuals to learn as you earn, approach to future manufacturing posture in Minnesota. From the Minnesota Safety Council. The Minnesota Safety Council supports the confirmation. Her interest in protecting people in the workplace stems from an understanding of the human cost and economic cost of injuries, accidents, illnesses, and unproductive workplaces. During the COVID-19 response, she and her department are playing an important role in the state's response. She's a strong voice for responsible planning and practices as Minnesota opens back up for business. We also, we heard from Scott Renner earlier, and I'll also mention that Ken Peterson, also one of her predecessors, who also worked with her in a variety of capacities, including at the Attorney General's office, gives her very, very high marks as a capable and experienced and competent professional in her field. From the Minnesota Professional Firefighters, competence and leadership matters, and Commissioner Lepping has embodied both during the COVID-19 emergency. In addition to assisting those on the medical front lines to gain important workers' compensation presumption, she quickly staffed up phone lines and produced frequently asked questions to support employers and employees unsure of their rights and responsibilities during the pandemic. She is the very capable leader labor and industry in the state needs for a successful future. From the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, the MPPOA, she is always responsive to our concerns and works hard to find solutions. She brings people together to ensure all voices are heard and respected. Under her leadership, the MPPOA and the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry were able to draft COVID-19 first responder workman's comp protection that is far beyond any other states. And from labor, we heard from the Smart Labor Union, the IBEW, the building trades, the carpenters, SATOOL, and the AFL-CIO, all giving her similarly high marks. That, my colleagues, is the very picture and the model of a commissioner who strikes a balance and works hard to find workable solutions to the many vexing problems that confront and challenge us. And when we need to take responsibility for policy changes, that's our business in the legislature. And I'll just say that, as has been expressed by my former colleague, I have some more comments. I was working with someone to find out a little bit more about some of the complaints and around the water gremlin matter. She was a crucial player in protecting water gremlin employees. When we discovered their actions were putting Minnesota workers and their families at risk. After working with public health, we discovered families with young children had dangerous blood lead levels, the common link, water gremlin. Immediately, they went into action, inspected the facility, and discovered that there were inadequate protections for these employees and their families, tracking back lead, of course, to their homes on shoes, clothing, and bodies. These unfair labor practices meant that babies and people were being exposed in their own homes to circumstances that were extremely unhealthy and unsafe. So serious that she ordered an immediate shutdown for 72 hours, a decision that was just reaffirmed by a Ramsey County judge, not just reaffirmed, but also extended another full day to plan on the cleanup and industrial hygiene practices. All along the way, she and her staff worked with the company, knowing that they would eventually resume operations, needed to do so in the safest possible way with cleaning facilities, PPE, and containment practices. It was pragmatic, compassionate, and swift leadership, exactly what we need from a commissioner. And as has been expressed earlier, the many sonorous intonations earlier about how seriously we're taking this, clearly this is not being taken seriously. To do this as an ambush in this manner is disrespectful of the traditions of this chamber, is disrespectful of our relationships, is disrespectful of the minority, and is clearly feels like it's nothing but playing games and trying to get a shot off at a chief executive with which you're unhappy. I have never seen this kind of an ambush mounted on the floor of the Senate like this before. I am just absolutely incredulous, and it shows an amount of irresponsibility with the majority that is really hard to contemplate. I can't imagine our having done the same in years past, to simply spring on this chamber an effort to take down the commissioner of the executive branch without even letting the executive branch or the minority party know that this is even going to be happening. Members, think about that for just a second. To simply spring this on us today, after having said the previous day that nothing controversial would be coming up today. That's not serious. That's game playing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next on the list is Senator Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sitting at home, enjoying session, watching Jim Abler speak several times on a bill that was already going to pass. I appreciate that, Jim. Enjoying some good discussion, trying to play it safe. And then I watched Senator Gazelka make a decision to make an attempt to remove a commissioner. I texted the governor, went back and forth. He found out at the same time I did, because he got a text from Paul right as he stood up to talk about it, saying that he was going to do this. That's pretty Bush League, if you ask me. On top of that, I hear the warnings that we're going to have discussions, and we've had committee hearings, and Senator Gazelka has spoke to the governor and said he was unhappy with things as some sort of prelude that we would know at any moment this is what we're going to see happen next. It boggles the mind. And I'm so frustrated with that. But I think a lot of people have already made that point. So I just listened to my friend, Senator Dibble, talk about the qualifications that she brings in. And let me be clear, folks, this state is lucky to have her as a commissioner with the kind of experience, passion, and background that she brings. This state is lucky to have someone who has the kind of experience and connections and understanding of labor on a global level, not just a state or local level, not just a national level. This person's experience is probably the most we've ever had of someone walking into that position. It is hard for me to understand when I listen to the arguments made about why we should remove her. I heard an argument that some people that Senator Gazelka spoke with felt like they were treated poorly. And if that's the case, it's a good reason to be mad. I also found out that we're mad about the way an amusement park in northern Minnesota was treated, and there may be some legitimate concerns there. And I kept waiting. There must be a hammer that's going to fall. There must be some clear evidence, some sort of malfeasance or something we can point to, that clearly we wouldn't make such an egregious or monumental movement out of the blue unless there was some smoking gun that would explain our reasoning. And then the GOP was done talking. Because there wasn't one. There just wasn't. You look at the pedigree this person brings to the table, the professionalism, the experience, and then you look at the ridiculously long list, bipartisan list, including former Speaker Sviggum, who, as you know, isn't the biggest friend of the left, who unanimously endorses Commissioner Lepik. You think about the names on that list, the people that have worked truly bipartisan, and I want to talk about Ajax for a second. That's a company that has been truly working bipartisan across the aisle to get good work done to help people. They're a good business. They do good work, and they think she's a good choice. So, with the lack of really any coherent argument from my friends across the aisle, and with the preponderance of evidence and examples and endorsements, it leads me to wonder, why would you do this? What would be the reason for this? Is it because we didn't get our way and now we're mad? Is it because the governor hurt our feelings? Why would you do this? It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm looking for something that resembles some sort of logic that would explain A to B equals C. And there's just no B here. There just isn't one. I have yet to hear a rational and cogent argument that even comes close to rising to the level of anything more than getting talked to by the governor. It's unbelievable. The experience this person brings in is just paramount to what we want in this commissioner. And when I look at the resume she brings in and where she's went to school and the experience she has not only locally but internationally, the way she deals with businesses and the outreaches she's done, we have some businesses that are unhappy with her. Shocking development. I bet every commissioner has some constituents that aren't happy because they didn't get what they wanted. That's what happens when you're in government. You got to make choices. Just because you don't like someone, which, by the way, is the ringing thing I heard throughout session from lobbyists about my friends across the aisle, was they just don't like her. That's cool. You don't have to like her. That doesn't mean she hasn't done her job. It's embarrassing. I hope the press and the people are listening. I hope the state is listening, because this is the prime reason why we are failing in the Senate. It's hijinks like this. It's embarrassing to our state. Not only that, it creates a really horrible continued relationship with the governor. I get that you don't want that person there. Let us know. Let's have a battle on equal footing and have that discussion. Let's go back and forth on the ideas. The only reason why you hijack this conversation is you know you can't win the argument. That's the only reason you do it. And that's just embarrassing. If you can't stand any argument, don't make it. I'd like a roll call on this, please. I can speak personally.
A roll call will be granted.
Thank you. I can speak personally that what happened with the TCE in Water Gremlin and the involvement and engagement that happened right away, because that's my district along with Senator Wiegert. It was important, it was fast, and you know who she worried about in that situation? The workers. Taking out and a vote against this commissioner is a vote against the workers of our state, someone who's taking care of our workers. That's important. Someone who protects and makes sure they're getting a fair deal. That is not. This vote does the exact opposite of that. I have to say that for all the time that I've watched the things we do in this Senate, this is probably the best example that, God forbid, we ever get in the majority of how not to behave, is this example right here. I'm disappointed. We should not be voting on this, and if we do vote on this, you should vote to confirm Commissioner Lepik. Thank you.
Members, that completes the list that I have. Are there any final comments? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't sure if I was going to speak today or not, but I feel compelled to do so. Let me talk about just a couple of things that I heard today. I reached out to Senator Champion yesterday and left him a voicemail that there were some things coming up that were related to the Jobs Committee, and I never got a call back. I wish he had been here. As far as an ambush, Senator Gazelka and I met with the governor back in February. I had a conversation with Commissioner Lepik. At that time, we had a hearing in the Jobs Committee, a confirmation hearing. Senator Franzen said that she didn't have the ability to defend herself. She did. She had the ability to defend herself in that committee, and she was voted out without recommendation. I'm appalled when I hear that we're being accused of taking this commissioner out by gender. I'm appalled. We should not be looking at the gender of a commissioner. We should be looking at their performance. And that's what we did in the Jobs Committee when we brought her up for confirmation hearing, and that's what we're doing today. Senator Cohen, you mentioned you took out some, you've not confirmed commissioners based on ideology. I shared with Commissioner Lepik just the opposite. I thought it was wrong not to confirm somebody based on their ideology. I know we have a governor of another party, of another philosophy, who's going to put somebody in there. This was based on her job performance. She has a tremendous resume. You're absolutely right. But she hasn't performed to it. I worked with her on wage theft. I worked with her on trying to correct wage theft. And being stonewalled by the department and addressing industry needs. The people who were having to comply with wage theft or be fined. I've worked with her on the new rules that she's been putting out, where rules to construction industry were written in such a way that they weren't implementable, and she had to have multiple meetings after the fact and delay the implementation because she didn't work with industry on making sure that the rules were written in a way that could be implementable. And let's not forget that Commissioner Yecke was not confirmed at 3:40 in the morning, and I've talked to a few of the senators that were here, and they were given no advance notice. So to say that this is unprecedented is not correct. So I reached out to my minority lead. We held a confirmation hearing. We took a vote. Senator Gazelka's motion supports that vote. We've talked to the governor 6 months ago. There's nothing surprising about this. There's nothing in an ambush about this. And so, members, I support Senator Gazelka's motion.
Senator Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Pratt, I apologize for speaking after you. I was trying to get a hold of Senator Champion to make sure that he at least had been part of this conversation prior to this afternoon. And Senator Champion had not. And Senator Pratt, as you know, I sit on the Jobs and Labor Committee, and we have worked well together over the past several years. And I've appreciated your ability and willingness to work with our side of the aisle as we work to try to solve problems from the minority perspective. Members, I had no intention of speaking here today. And there was a point yesterday where I thought about perhaps not even being here today for different reasons. But I think what we're faced with here right now, members, is the exact reason why it's important for us to come here, even on days where we don't feel like it's important. You just never know what's going to come up. And this, to me, and I have absolutely nothing to lose here, right? I'm not beholden to anybody right now. I've got about 3 months left to serve in this amazing Senate, this amazing Minnesota Senate, part of this Minnesota legislature. And I want to do that with my dignity and with pride, knowing what this body is about. Senator Miller, earlier this year, we had really good discussions when we were trying to figure out the early response to this pandemic and how we dealt with those frontline workers and their exposure to what really truly is still an unknown disease, something we don't know a lot about. But members, I got to tell you, after having gone through the last few months, this is the type of politics Minnesotans don't want. This is the type of politics that we don't need. We're better than this. I know many of you are not happy with Commissioner Lepic. There are commissioners that I'm not truly excited about either. And there's also been commissioners that have been appointed by Republican governors that I've enjoyed working with, that even to this day I call friends. I think there are other ways to solve this. And I think before we go down this path of just, flat out taking somebody out, let's go back and let's revisit that. Because I think Minnesota wants something better from the Minnesota Senate. And I think the Minnesota Senate has something better to offer. I want to be in a position where we can have a good conversation in front of the committee with Commissioner Lepic. And Senator Pratt, we did that, right? But not to this level. Not to the point where Senator Champion is not even given an appropriate heads up where he has the ability to come here as the lead Democrat on that committee and offer his opinion. Senator Champion works all the time with Commissioner Lepic, but we don't have the ability to hear that story from his perspective. And I think that's something that we're missing. And I think that's something that Minnesota is missing. And I'm not entirely certain that it's fair to the governor. And I'm not entirely certain that it's fair to the rest of the slate of commissioners. And we can say what we want about this slate of commissioners, but think about the next ones, and the next round after that, and the round after that. Regardless of what governor appoints a commissioner, to always have the threat of this confirmation, non-confirmation hanging over your head, it's got to be a challenge. And it's going to be a detriment to bringing in good, quality, professional people to serve in these roles. And that is exactly what we want. So I don't want to play politics. Senator Gazelka, I consider you a friend. Senator Pratt, I consider you a friend. Many of you on that side of the aisle, I consider friends of mine. And I think we've got to find a better way. This is not the way, right? It doesn't seem right. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like something that the Minnesota Senate should do. Mr. President, I don't know how many other options that we have here. I feel like we're going down a path that we can't recover from. But I think maybe there is an opportunity, and I think perhaps reasonable people can come together and figure out alternative options. Mr. President, with that, I would make a motion to lay the confirmation motion on the table and ask for a roll call.
Senator Simonson moves that we lay the confirmation on the table. Roll call has been requested. Roll call granted. The secretary will take the roll. Members in the retiring room, room 303, and the President's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Retiring room 303 and President's office. Members in room 323, 237, and 206, please come to chamber to vote. Members in room 323, 237, and 206. I will call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes yes.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes yes.
Champion votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Clausen votes yes.
Clausen votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes yes.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Hayden votes yes.
Hayden votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Lane votes yes.
Lane votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes yes.
Latz votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Marty votes yes.
Marty votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes yes.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Rest votes yes.
Rest votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Sparks votes yes.
Sparks votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes yes.
Torres Ray votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Wickland votes yes.
Wickland votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Little votes yes.
Little votes aye. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Herr votes yes.
Herr votes aye.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'll call on Senator Jasinski to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Johnson votes no.
Johnson votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Curran votes no.
Curran votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Hall votes no.
Hall votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes no.
Goggin votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Jensen votes no.
Jensen votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Anderson votes no.
Anderson P. votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Nelson votes no.
Nelson votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes no.
Lang votes no. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 32 ayes and 35 nays, the motion does not prevail. Further discussion on the motion, Senator Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I just kind of find this extremely troubling behavior from this body. The lack of notice and the lack of care and concern for our hardworking Minnesotans is unbelievable when it comes to this majority party in the Senate and the politics they are playing. So first, the majority party obstructs a bonding bill that will invest in our economy, in our infrastructure. And now they're taking down a commissioner whose sole responsibility is to protect the safety of workers during specifically when we're in the middle of a pandemic, but on work sites. This is exactly what Minnesotans don't want. They don't want this politics. They're tired of it. And I just don't understand why the party in charge of this body doesn't get that. Members, this is exactly why people are frustrated with this process. Besides the obstruction, again, of jobs and a lot of other good things that Minnesotans expect and the leadership that they expect. And I just can't believe that this is going to continue time and time again. Instead of doing what is right, you guys are just going to continue to obstruct and put sand in the gears and slow down. And this just isn't what this body is accustomed to. So this is just unbelievable what's going on today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, my apologies for speaking again. I just wanted to, again, convey some thoughts in a response to correct the record from Senator Champion. He wanted to respond to Senator Pratt's statement that he had put a call in, and Senator Champion responds by saying that Senator Pratt never called him. And by the way, yesterday was a primary election day, and he had a primary opponent, and he got no call from Senator Pratt today. So that's the statement in response from Senator Champion. Members, I also wanted to respond. There's a claim that we had done the same in the past. That's just not true. We, as a majority caucus, at the point of considering both Commissioner Yecky's confirmation as well as Commissioner Molnau's confirmation, informed the minority party before that happened. It might have happened late at night, but they were informed ahead of time. As a matter of fact, there were big signs out in the hallway promoting and touting Commissioner Yecky's confirmation. So someone knew that was coming up that particular evening. So if Mr. President, if Senator Gazelka would yield.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Dibble.
Majority Leader Gazelka, can you tell me if you had put in a call or asked any of your, did you yourself put in a call to Minority Leader Kent about this matter and that it was going to be taken up today?
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President, Senator Dibble, and members. I thought about talking about this in my closing, but I might as well take it now. I sent a text as I got up to Senator Kent, Representative Hortman, Speaker Dowd, and the governor and his chief of staff. And so the question is, why did I do it that way? And frankly, I think what Representative Simonson talked about certainly made me think about why was that the approach. And it frankly should tell you that there is some dysfunction between the legislative branch, particularly the Senate, and particularly the governor. The fact that there are so many things that are happening that we are trying to move and he's trying to stop. And just to give you an example, the first bonding bill that we brought here, we had votes from the Democratic Party, which we need to pass a bonding bill. That was the $1 billion bonding bill. And the governor got wind of it and twisted arms of people that came to me, Democrats that came to me and said he's threatening my projects if I don't vote no on this. And that happened more than once, and that's only a this year thing that has begun to happen with the governor. And so it became something that I knew that we needed to do, and I should have done this a long time ago. Anybody that's been an employer and has employees that aren't working out, and you love your employees, and you're trying to figure out, you know, you got to let them go, they're just not doing their job, and sometimes you wait and you wait and you wait. Well, that was part of this scenario, is waiting and waiting when I knew that she needed to go, that she was not doing her job. And that's why I went to the governor in February and tried to help him get her out, which is what a good employer tries to do, find another path for somebody that's not working out so everybody can save face. But that wasn't happening. And then as the governor began to shift his tactics, you know, this isn't the only commissioner, frankly, that we're frustrated with. If you look at the Commissioner of Deed developing a template to send out to businesses, to send back to the governor to say how great this mask mandate is, when people outside of our bubble have said that is totally inappropriate. We're going to look at that. When the PCA starts to do California emission standards apart from the legislative process and just do it versus rulemaking, that's something we should be taking a look at. I'd tell you, we take a look at MMB and why they increased the salaries against the Senate's wishes of the state workers, roughly a 5% raise when we have a big deficit shortfall. We want to start looking at those things more, but we've been so wrapped up in COVID and the riots and the lawlessness that we didn't get to that. So why is because I didn't want to be undermined again to destroy the direction that I knew we needed to go. But I don't think that was fair to this body. I don't think it was fair to this body. But even saying that, I still think it's the right time. It should have been months ago, but that doesn't change the fact that the time is now.
Senator Dibble.
Senator Gazelka would yield again.
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Dibble.
Senator Gazelka, did you direct your chief of staff to call our chief of staff and let them know that this matter was going to be in front of this body today?
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Dibble, I'll take responsibility for the direction we went on this. You know, and again, talking about the breakdown, I just got a copy of a tweet from Governor Walz. Can't let this pandemic put people out of their homes. Today we extended Minnesota's eviction freeze to help keep Minnesota safe and healthy. 3:52 p.m., no conversation with me. You know, why do we not, if we're not working together is the point. And so I am responsible for what we do here and also holding different people accountable that aren't doing their job.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. So thank you, Senator Gazelka, for your expansive explanation of why you launched this sneak attack and this ambush on this chamber, because you wanted to create an unfair advantage in opposition to a governor who has shown some political ability and effectiveness and some leadership. Now we understand exactly what's going on here. And so I appreciate your response. Members, think about what's going to happen at the end of business today if this, in fact, goes through and this confirmation is not upheld. The commissioner is going to have to entirely pack her office and vacate her office by the end of business today. What does that do for the leadership of that agency? What kind of signal does that send to us as a minority party? And what does that do? Great, wonderful, noble words of trying to create the ability to work together. What does that do to our relationship with the executive branch? We've been kept in the dark. The public has been kept in the dark. The executive branch, the governor has been kept in the dark. This was a sneak attack. This was an ambush. This was disrespectful. It's disreputable. It's embarrassing. Once again, the majority party is bringing embarrassment to this chamber. And it makes me ashamed when I have to go back to the public and explain what exactly kind of circus are we managing over here. I left the House almost 20 years ago. So I have a note here. The governor and chief of staff got the majority leader's text at 3:30 p.m. So when you got up, it's when you got up to speak, not the beginning of the day, not when you got up from bed. Now we understand what that means. Members, and what signal does this give to other talented professionals who are considering the call to service from the governor when they're subjected to an arbitrary and capricious confirmation process like this? You have not made the case against this commissioner, and you subject them to this kind of a confirmation process, and it's dispensed by ambush. Members, as Senator Simonson said, there's got to be a better way. This is not the way to do business in the Minnesota Senate. Thank you.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to just follow up on what Senator Dibble was talking about, because I got that text, and it says actually 329. I have it right here in front of me. We are taking up DOLI, Department of Labor and Industry Commissioner, today. I don't expect her to be confirmed. So this was a foregone conclusion. Clearly it was something that had been planned, and everybody who was part of the Senate majority, the Republicans, knew about it, but nobody else did, and that was intentional. And that is what needs to be clear. This was intentional to do this. I mean, there's only one way to describe it, which is as an ambush, which is not a responsible way to treat important business of the people of Minnesota. I understand that Senator Gazelka is frustrated. The voters spoke and elected Governor Walz. The voters spoke and put a majority in the House of Representatives that is DFL, that is the opposite party of him. I understand that is a frustrating situation. That is also the American system. The Minnesota system is modeled after the federal system. Checks and balances, separation of powers, fundamental democratic principles that we all learned about in school, and it matters. And it also matters that this body isn't 100% one party. There are 32 DFL members, there are 35 Republican members, and when you do that math, the DFL minority isn't some tiny little inconsequential minority. We are 48% of this body. We represent almost half. That should not be some mandate to do things like this by fiat, by ambush, by sneaking up on people. That should dictate that we should be trying to work together, that we should be honest with each other, that we should make good faith efforts to work together to represent the halves of the state in this divided body, in this divided legislature, the only one famously in the United States of America right now. And this is a betrayal of that. Will Senator Gazelka yield?
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Kent.
Senator Gazelka, I'm going to ask a direct question, and hopefully I will get a direct and honest answer. Will we take up any other confirmations today or before we adjourn sine die?
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Kent, you can always expect a direct and honest answer, and no, this will be the last business today.
Senator Kent.
Thank you. I've always thought I could take Senator Gazelka at his word, and now in the past 24 hours, I'm afraid I don't believe I can do that anymore, but I appreciate that here on the record, he has answered that question. This is a really disappointing day. It sets a terrible precedent for this body. We have an election coming up. It feels like we are fully in campaign mode, but I know that when I'm out talking to people in my community, which is traditionally a fairly moderate and divided community, not a strong partisan community one way or the other, the thing I hear loud and clear is they want us to work together. Well, I think it's been made really clear today where the majority party in this body stands in terms of working together.
Final discussion, Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President and members, and no doubt this is a serious emotional issue. She has not done her job. We should have done this sooner, but we had to manage around COVID and manage around the lawlessness, the riots, the death of George Floyd, and coming back after every 30 days was extremely difficult. I wish that had happened better, but that does not change the fact that she's not doing her job. And the Senate has been entrusted with holding the executive branch accountable and the commissioners that they hire to make sure they're doing the role that they're supposed to do it as commissioners. And it is not often, roughly one every 6 years. I think it's been about 10 years since a commissioner's been removed. But this was not a sudden event. She went through the committee process early in the year. She was passed out without recommendation, which is the first warning. A number of Republican senators went to the governor privately to say she's not doing her job, find another spot for her, let her save face. Then COVID hit, then the riots hit. This was the time that there was nothing else really going on. I wish I'd given more lead time, but it does not change that she's not doing her job. Members, this is a red vote.
Member Senator Gazelka renews his motion. The question before the body is, will the Senate, having given its advice, now consent to this appointment? A roll call has been requested. The Secretary will take the roll. Members in the retiring room, room 303, and the President's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Retiring room 303 and President's office. Members in rooms 323, 237, and 206, please come to the chamber to vote. 323, 237, and 206. I will call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes yes.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz, hold on one moment, please. Members, it's hard to hear up here. If you have discussions, please take them outside the chamber. We are under a roll call vote. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Champion votes yes.
Champion votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Clausen votes yes.
Clausen votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes yes.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Hayden votes yes.
Hayden votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Lane votes yes.
Lane votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes yes.
Latz votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Marty votes yes.
Marty votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes yes.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Rest votes yes.
Rest votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Sparks votes yes.
Sparks votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes yes.
Torres Ray votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Wickland votes yes.
Wickland votes aye. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Little votes yes.
Little
Thank you.
votes aye. I'll now call on Senator Jasinski to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Johnson votes no.
Johnson votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coran votes no.
Coran votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Hall votes no.
Hall votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes no.
Goggin votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Jensen votes no.
Jensen votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes no.
Lang votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Anderson P. votes no.
Anderson P. votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Nelson votes no.
Nelson votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. That ends my votes.
Mr. President,
Senator Kent.
absentees.
Absentees. All members, please vote. Members, please vote. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 32 ayes and 34 nays, the motion does not prevail and the appointment is not confirmed. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we will revert to the third order of business, messages from the House. The secretary will read the messages.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce the passage by the House of the following Senate file herewith return Senate File Number 1, a bill for an act relating to human services. Mr. President, I have the honor to inform you that the House of Representatives of the state of Minnesota is about to adjourn the 2020 third special session sine die. Patrick D. Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
There's no action required on those messages. Remaining under motions and resolutions, the secretary will read Senate Resolution Number 7.
Senators Gazelka and Kent introduce Senate Resolution Number 7, the Senate resolution relating to adjournment of the special session.
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, I move that Senate Resolution Number 7 be adopted.
On that motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, members, before I moved that the Senate adjourn sine die, I want to give a likely scenario that we're trying to figure out and move through, and that is there are a few commissioners that we want to have some informational hearings. We know that we cannot pass them out, but we think it's prudent to take a look at some of the things that have been going on. So we don't have that firmly set up. I'm just trying to give you a heads up that that's something that we are working on. It's just trying to navigate through all of the things that we all know is going on between here and November that makes that difficult, but I wanted to communicate that in good faith. So, Mr. President, I move that the Senate adjourn sine die.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The motion prevails. The Senate stands adjourned.